I've been stalking these subreddits for a while and I thought just reading people's stories would help me. Or if I found someone with a similar situation and I could see how they did it, but I guess my situation is unique. So here we go. First, let me be clear. I don't care if you think this is fake. I don't care if you want to rip me a new one after I vent. It already happened. I thought I was okay. I thought I moved on, but after last weekend, it all came back, and that anger I had back then just came in full force. And even though I'm back home with my fiancée, that anger towards my ex just won't go away. I spent years in anger management for what she did and the situation that was created, and I thought I was okay. Right now I just turned 39. I was 18 when I met my ex Marisol. During that time, I was a gangbanger with the Latin Kings. I was a member since I was 13 and always in and out of trouble. Marisol was a church girl. My grandmother dragged me to Sunday Mass, and when I saw her, to me, it was love at first sight. I asked my cousin, who was a friend of hers, if he could introduce us, but he refused. He didn't want me to mess with her. He didn't want me to ruin her. Have you ever met someone that you wanted to make yourself better to be with? Wanted to be that man who would walk the right path? That was her. When I found out that she was going to church almost every day, I hung out by the steps, talking to her. I always walked her to and from church. She made feel like I wasn't worthless. One thing led to another and we were dating and I felt great. For a year and a half I pushed myself away from the gang life, got my GED, became a regular churchgoer, and was thinking about the future when I got unintentionally pulled back in. I was at a store and ran into someone that I used to have problems with. They were running their mouths and I tried to ignore it. I swear I did. I just let them talk and I walked away, but then I got stabbed in the shoulder blade and I lost my mind. I beat the shit out of him. I got arrested and suddenly it was like the shit I did to make my life better vanished. Marisol was pissed at me, my grandmother kept bringing up my past mistakes, and my cousin was telling me that he knew that I wasn't going to change. My public defender saw me trying to better myself and by the grace of God, got me off after a month in lockup. Despite being angry with me, Marisol did visit me almost daily. A month after I got out, I found out I was going to be a father and I didn't want my kid to have a dad that was dead or in jail. We eloped. I went to a trade school to become a mechanic and I busted my ass for my future family. When Luna was born, it was almost the worst day of my life. Marisol wouldn't stop bleeding. She went into shock and they had to give her a double hysterectomy. She was in the hospital for months and Luna became my world. I wanted her life to be the best. I wanted to give her the world. When Marisol was released, I promised her that our daughter will have a life far better than ours, and for years I kept that promise. I saved enough money to move us to the suburbs, became homeowners. I was Girl Scout leader, if you could believe that. I made sure Luna went to private school, made sure she knew how to defend herself, and always made sure I was the perfect husband. I didn't know my parents. Didn't have a positive male role model in my life, so I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. That's a lie. TV dads were my male role models and I mimicked them and the marriage they had on TV. As the years went by, I owned my own garage, my cousin became a pastor, my grandmother was still a pain in my ass, my relationship with my wife was stronger than ever. I made sure I kept my prison body, but Luna hated me. Since she turned 13 she just started hating me. She didn't want me to hug her. Rolled her eyes every time I told her I loved her. Ignored me when I asked her about her day in school. It hurt me and Marisol saw it. She told me that she's a teenager and that I should just let it ride. She will come back to me. For 2 years it was like that. So for her quinceañera, I wanted to go all out. Got everything she wanted and she was still disrespectful, and briefly the old me almost came out just to put her in her place, but instead, I went to my cousin, vented my frustration and doubts about being a good father, and he told me to just let her be, and he said a prayer for me. I wanted a slideshow for the father-daughter dance. I got a chunk of the pictures of us together, but I realized I didn't have any recent pictures of us. She didn't want to take any. The last time I had pictures of her and I smiling with me was on her 13th birthday, and those were on my daughter's broken tablet. I took that tablet, went to a repair shop, and I didn't care the cost. I needed that tablet fixed. After a day and $300. The tech fixed it and I was happy. I knew her passcode, but I never bothered invading her privacy. I just wanted those pictures, and when I opened that tablet and looked in the gallery, there they were. My little girl, smiling and happy to be with me. I felt great. Then the instant messages appeared. It was my daughter talking to my wife. It was a long banter that she didn't want me to dance with her, and it did hurt, but like my wife said, she's being a teenager. Then she said something that destroyed me. She texted why she had to do the father-daughter dance with me since I'm not her father. I felt my heart stopped, I got dizzy, my mouth dried up, and I needed to sit down. My wife responded that I raised her, I loved her, and that makes me her father. But Luna responded by saying that my cousin is her father and she can't wait for her to turn 18 so she could tell me the truth and she could live with her real dad. That she hated me, that she thanked God that I'm not her father. Marisol began cussing her out, saying that it was a mistake for my cousin to tell her the truth 2 years ago, and the more they talked, the angrier I was getting. My wife lied to me for 15 years. My cousin, whom I confide my issues about Luna and my fears about being a bad father, not only fucked my wife, but had me raise his child. I wanted to hurt them. I felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, grief. I wanted to scream, cry, and die at the same time, if that makes any sense. I went to a dark place, and so I wouldn't do anything stupid. I told Marisol that I needed to focus on work so I could pay the quints, and instead I drove to Manhattan and saw my old public defender, who wasn't a low-level attorney anymore. He had a nice expensive firm near Midtown East. I was surprised that he remembered me, but apparently, I was his first case as a public defender. We sat down and I told him everything. Gave him the tablet, and when he turned it on, the messages just kept coming. Only this time, Luna was talking to my cousin, her real father, and he was telling her to give me a chance. How I was always there for her, but Luna told him that so was he. How it makes sense that they have so much in common, and even called him Poppy multiple times in their conversation, and he responded and told her that she was his little girl. We went through our options and he asked me what do I want to do? And I told him that I wanted to go full scorched earth. I wanted to poison the well, and he asked me several times if that is what I wanted and nodded. I also told him that everything had to be filed before the quints in 2 weeks. So we sat down and spent the next 12 hours on what was needed to be done, and I followed his instructions to the letter. I secretly placed my business for sale. Called the private school and told them that I will not be paying for next year. Closed the college accounts, and the savings that I had for Luna, and prepared to place my house for sale online. No one was the wiser. I followed his instructions perfectly. There was only one thing I deviated from. The day of the quints. That day went off without a hitch. The whole family was there. Luna was smiling, having fun. Marisol kept asking me if I was okay, and I lied to her. It was hard lying to her. From the moment I met her, I never lied to her, and during those 2 weeks, every time, I kissed her, held her, made love to her. It was hard not to scream at her. It was hard not to hate her. She knowingly let me raise another man's child. She slept with my cousin, a man who saw as my brother, the godfather of my child, the best man when I eloped, my confidant. So the rage was hard to suppress, to say the least. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, I called her to the center of the stage. She looked annoyed, but walked over. I had the music playing and she smiled, and it tore me apart, seeing her smiling at me. For years I wanted to see that smile again, and now I didn't want it. As we dance, I had the slideshow playing. Pictures of the two of us, and towards the end of the song, screenshots of her text messages with her mother and real father. Needless to say, this didn't bode too well. Marisol looked like she saw a ghost. Luna just kept staring at the large screen, and my cousin just stared at me with fear. Marisol ran to me and told me that she could explain, and I told her that I filed for a divorce. That she could explain it in court. She grabbed my arm, begging me, and I pulled back. I told Luna that I busted my ass to give the world, and now she doesn't deserve it. I began to walk out, but not before telling my cousin that every time I see him, I'm going to knock him out. Then I knocked him out. The aftermath was harsh. Marisol and Luna was at my grandmother's apartment. Her family was shocked and disgusted with her. They wanted nothing to do with her. Her father actually apologized to me. I don't know why. He never liked me despite turning my life around. That man hated me, but now I was the perfect husband and father, but just a few days prior I was the former piece of shit. My grandmother had the audacity to tell me about the story Abraham, and how when came back from battle 3 years later, his wife had a 1-year-old child and he raised him as his own, and how I should be like Abraham, so I told her to get the fuck out of my house. Marisol came a few days later, crying as soon as she saw me, telling me that it was an accident. That when I was arrested she was so angry at me, and my cousin was there to console her, and one thing led to another and they had sex. It happened only one time and she was faithful to me ever since. She was willing to take a lie detector test to prove it. So I asked her how long she knew Luna wasn't mine, and she started crying more. That look she gave me just told me that she knew from day one, and asked her to leave. She wanted to go to counseling, telling me that I'm overreacting and we could make it work. It was in the past and I needed to get over it. That I am Luna's father, despite what happened, and I allowed my temper to get the best of me. I must have repeated "get over it" over a dozen times at full volume while grabbing her shit and tossing it out the door. I called her a lying whore. I told her that I didn't want to see her fucking face ever again, and I told her that this life that I built no longer belongs to her before shoving her out the door. A couple of weeks went by and she kept blowing up my phone. Not once Luna tried to reach out to me. Marisol was shocked to learn that I sold my business. Even more so when she learned that I had an open house. She came in screaming, telling the viewers to get out of her house and pleading with me to seek help. That I was ruining our marriage. That I had no right to sell our home. The home where we raised our child in, and I told her that this house is full of lies. It's a house where I raised another man's child, and when I sell it, I will give her half, and ordered her to get out before I called the cops. It was a bluff. All she had to do was play the victim and I would have been arrested, but she didn't. She complied. Shortly after this, my cousin came to talk to me and I knocked him out, dragged him outside and closed the door. I refused mediation. Marisol wanted to reconcile, but I didn't. I wanted a divorce and my attorney filed for a fast-track divorce, and in 3 months we were in the Nassau County Courthouse. I barely spoke to anyone during that time. I read horror stories about the court system, especially during divorce proceedings, but I didn't have that. I had a female judge who was very fair. My attorney took care of everything. First, Marisol's lawyer tried to talk about my past when I was in a gang, as if my past barred a reason for me to be a terrible husband and father, but my attorney quickly smacked that down and the judge reprimanded her attorney for trying to shame someone who turned their life around. My attorney presented all the evidence and offered a lump sum alimony payment with the pending sales of the house and business. At first Marisol kept asking me to reconsider, but I ignored her, and when she finally realized that I'm not budging, she agreed. Yet the real surprise happened when it came to child support. My attorney presented all of the text messages from Luna's conversation with Marisol, showing that not only Luna knew I am not her father, but she cannot wait to be with her real father, saying that she no longer has to live a lie. Marisol was completely caught by surprise from this. Then my attorney filed a motion to have my name removed from Luna's birth certificate, have my last name removed, as well as not being responsible for any child support since all parties agree that my cousin was her father. Marisol was shocked by this. She yelled at me, begged me not to do this to Luna, that I am her father because I raised her, and as pathetic as I may sound right now, but if Luna didn't act that way towards me, if she didn't say those things, I would have agreed. There were moments that I wanted to reach out and try to make it work, but then I would look at Luna's continuing text messages to her friends, her real father and mother, and I refocus on my resolve. Till this day, I don't know what hurts the most. Being lied to by a woman who you thought was the love of your life, or having a child who you tried to make their lives better, to give them the world, just toss you aside like trash. The judge was quiet for a long while, reading page after page after page of the text messages. In the end, she agreed. I was not financially responsible for Luna and my name could be removed. My attorney also filed a motion for the courts to go after my cousin to pay for child support, and a motion to sue my cousin in civil court for all the money I have spent raising Luna. The private schools, dance classes, Girl Scouts, horseback lessons. Everything I have ever spent on that child. And after my attorney explained to the judge that my cousin committed fraud for knowingly allowed me to raise his daughter and not offer any financial support or assistance. It was a Hail Mary, and the damn judge agreed. I didn't bother looking at Marisol when the judge made her decision. I didn't bother listening to her as I walked out the courthouse. I didn't care as I heard her cry. Her telling me that she only cheated one time and was faithful ever since. I just didn't care anymore. A few weeks later my ex called me, shocked that I stopped payments on Luna's private schools and all of her activities, and told her to call her baby daddy before hanging up. Even Luna called me, first time since this entire ordeal, and she fucking calls me crying that she has to go to public school, that they were moving to the old neighborhood and how scary it was and how she wanted us to be a family again. I told her to go to her real father, the man who she truly wanted, and ask him. I yelled at her, told her that not only she knew for years, but I read all the text messages, the back and forth, and from her own words, she was thankful that a hoodlum like me wasn't her father, even though I haven't been a hoodlum since the day I found out I was going to be a father. I hung up on her after that. I thought about ending it countless times. Thought about ending my cousin, but I made him pay. He had to pay me $500,000. $500,000 that was all mine, and not 1 cent belonged to my ex because she agreed on the lump sum. I didn't care that the money came from the church. I was hurting. I left New York shortly after, went to Idaho, as furthest away from New York as possible. I just picked a random state and city and just left. Opened up a new shop, got a house, but for 2 years I had trust issues. For 2 years, I saw a therapist, anger management, I went to rage rooms. It was difficult. Until I found myself going back to church, and ironically that was where I met my fiancée. Jocelyn is wonderful, she just turned 30 at the time and we just hit it off. I told her everything that happened to me. I explained to her that I'm going to have trust issues and she understood. A year later, she told me that I was going to be a dad and insisted that for me to have a DNA test, just so I can have peace of mind. I forgot what it felt like to be happy again, and when my son was born, I was overjoyed. I called my grandmother for the first time in years. She cried, and when I told her about my son, she insisted that I come to New York so she could meet her great-grandchild. Guilt-tripping me by saying that she's 90 and would like to see me one more time, and I agreed. We flew to New York, rented a car and drove to Bushwick. The one thing I dislike about the hood. You only need to see one person from your past and the whole fucking neighborhood knows that you're back. My grandmother saw my son, met my fiancé, made an offshoot comment in Spanish about her being white, and I just yes her to death. I was planning to spend the week, do the tourist thing for once. It was Jocelyn's first time in her life in the Big Apple and I wanted to make it special. Damn it, nothing works out as planned. First my ex shouted my name from downstairs. I looked out the window and was surprised how fat she got. My grandmother told me in Spanish to talk to her and Jocelyn agreed. I went downstairs, was awkwardly silent for a minute, and that anger just came back like a flood. Marisol told me that I looked good and said that she looked like shit. She told me that she missed me, that she never been with another man since the divorce, and I ignored her. She even had the audacity to tell me that I'm a grandfather, and I gave her a look. Apparently Luna got with a decent guy, and got knocked up at 18. Her baby daddy joined the Marines to support them and her father wanted nothing to do with her, just pays the child support and refuses to acknowledge her. He's no longer a pastor and is working at the Banco Popular 2 blocks over. Then told me that Luna named the baby after me and I couldn't stand looking at her. Marisol wanted me wait because Luna was on her way over and I just walked away. I went to my grandmother's house and I didn't have to tell Jocelyn anything. She just knew and we left. In the elevator I told her what happened and she smiled and told me everything was going to be alright. The look on Marisol's face when we left the building. She was looking at my fiancé like she was the other woman, and Jocelyn, without missing a beat, introduced my son to her. Well, she said, I would like you to meet his biological child. That was a knife twist, but she knew my pain. Marisol kept trying to stop me from leaving. Telling me that Luna felt bad about what she did and Jocelyn wanted me to make amends, but I was so angry. I hopped into the car. Ignoring Marisol's pleads, and Jocelyn told me to extend an olive branch, so I gave her my number, so Luna could call me, and left. At the red light I saw my cousin by the cuchifrito stand and I don't know what came over me. I got out the car, ran up to him and beat the shit out of him. Jocelyn was screaming, telling me to stop, and when we locked eyes, I could see the fear. I spit on him and left. I'm back home. Working, being a dad, and a good fiancé to a beautiful woman. Yet since going back, when I'm alone with my thoughts, anger comes back. Luna did text me with a picture of her smiling with her son and telling me that she was sorry for what she did. Yet, I don't know if she's sorry that she missed me or if she's sorry because the man she wanted to be her father wasn't the man she thought he was. I'm so confused and I'm scared to reach out to her. I want to get past this. I want to move on. My family was my everything, my daughter was my world. Even after these years it still hurts, it still makes me angry, but I know I need to move on, but it's hard. I want to reach out to Luna, but I'm so scared. I have people telling me to let her back in, but all I could think about are those text messages and the lies. The constant lies. I need help and my usual methods are not working. Thank you for reading this, I needed to vent. Like I mentioned, I don't care if you think this is fake. I really don't give a rat's ass, but your help is appreciated. Update. I'm waiting for the mods to approve this. It's been a while and yesterday was Father's Day. Luna tried calling me several times and I looked at the phone. I wanted to answer, I didn't, but all that kept lingering in my mind was those messages. What she said to her mother, to her real father, her friends. So I ignored it. Eventually I listened to her voicemail and she sounded so cheerful. She briefly apologized for her actions, but to me, it didn't sound sincere, just passive. Maybe I'm overthinking it. She mentioned about her son, her finance, and asked me to call her. Simple requests and I became infuriated. My grandmother and my fiancé are telling me to give her a chance, but when I asked my grandmother if Luna or Marisol ever asked about me in the 4 years I left, she said Marisol did, constantly, but not Luna. So in my twisted mind I think Luna wants me in her life to her child would be taken care of. Or maybe she wants to milk me, and that made me so angry. Even Marisol tried calling me constantly and I'm already thinking about changing my number. So I spent the majority of my Father's Day in the gym, hitting the heavy bag, and I have an appointment today with an anger management group. Maybe they can give me an outside opinion. If this ever gets published by the mods, I would like to get your opinion as well. In the meantime, I'm just figuring this out on my own. Update number 2. I would like to thank LegendFiji42 for his advice on sending an email as a start. I sent a small email to Luna that simply said, "What do you want?" Didn't expect the multi-paragraph response. She started the email profusely apologizing for how she acted. She said when she found out I wasn't her father, she was angry. She confronted her mother and she cried, making her promise not to tell me. Since she felt lost, she began to talk to my cousin, her real father, more and more. He told her of my violent past, the things I used to do, things that I kept a secret from her. This made her angry, and the more they spent time together, the more she pulled away from me. She said she felt bad from time to time, but my cousin would reinforce her feelings towards me. The day of the quince, she said while we were dancing, she realized how stupid she was acting. She realized how much I loved her, and then her messages appeared on screen. In the days that followed, she was told by my wife's side of the family to give me space, to not call me, and she listened. She said she was watching her family fall apart because of her and she couldn't do anything to fix it. She told me she understood why I did what I did. Yet she wanted to reach out. Her grandfather kept telling her that I loved her, that I raised her, and despite what I saw through her messages, I will do the right thing, and she believed him. During the divorce, her mother fell in a dark place. Not talking to her, barely eating, she was just existing. When she found out that my name was removed from her birth certificate, she said she had a panic attack. Her mother told her that they will have to move back to Brooklyn, and when she asked about her life and school, her mother told her that was the life your father gave you, and he's not your father anymore. So she called me, begging, and I cursed her out, then hanged up. She cried for days. She tried to reach out to my cousin, who pretty much ignored her. She even went to the church and he told her to leave. Called her a mistake. Her mother refused to talk to her, basically locked herself in a room, only leaving to use the bathroom or take a shower. She begged her grandfather to take her to see me, and when they came to Long Island, she learned that I moved. Her grandfather told her that he will talk to my grandmother and find out where I went. For the next 2 years, according to her, it was hell. The entire neighborhood knew what happened to her and her mother. Her father avoided her at all cost and tried not to pay child support. It took her grandfather to threaten him to start paying. In the meantime, her mother didn't talk to her. She was just locked in her room. The few times they did spoke, she called her an ungrateful girl, and she was the reason why she lost the love of her life. Her grandfather had to put her mother in her place by telling her that her infidelity was the reason why she lost the love of her life, and she locked herself back into the room. So Luna barely stayed home, and that was how she met the father of her child. He worked in the corner bodega, they were the same age, and after a few months of talking, one thing led to another and she ended up pregnant. Her grandfather was furious, but when her boyfriend insisted that he would marry her, that cooled things down. Luna said her pregnancy was a blessing in disguise. Her mother began talking to her again and even began leaving the room to be by her side for every checkup. Being a senior in high school while pregnant was cliché, but she made it work. A month before the baby was born, she graduated, and her boyfriend joined the Marines. He wanted to elope before leaving, but she wants a wedding. Her boyfriend had no issues naming his son after me. Apparently, his father was absent, and the fact he was a junior was a reminder that he shared the name of a man who didn't want him. When she heard I was in town, she got a speeding ticket trying to get to my grandmother's apartment. She wanted to see me. Wanted to apologize, wanted me to see her son. She just wanted to see me. However, she was late and she cried. When her mother gave her my number, she wanted to call me immediately, but the entire neighborhood was talking on how I beat her father up, so she waited. Her mother was sad to see that I moved on and have a son. Luna was happy to know she had a little brother, but her mother became a little more depressed. I felt sorry for Marisol. After I read the email, I called Marisol and asked her if this was true. That she refused to talk to Luna for years and blaming her for our divorce. She confirmed it, and at first I yelled at her, but I regained my composure when I hear her crying. I told her to move on. Find someone else, but she said no. She told me that I was her husband and I will always be her husband. It broke my heart a little. I then had my grandmother go see my cousin so I could talk to him. The second he heard my voice, he began to cry and begged me to forgive him. I just asked him why he didn't be a father to Luna? Why he poisoned her against me, and he said it was envy. He was in love with Marisol and I took her from him. When I was arrested, he consoled her, manipulated her, and barely last a second with her, and she realized what she was doing and shoved him off of her, but he already came. When she found out she was pregnant, he knew the baby was his. They both knew. It was supposed to be a secret. Marisol took her double hysterectomy as God's punishment for her infidelity and deceit. When Luna turned 13, he was drunk. Seeing my life, and envy was the one sin he couldn't shake. So he wanted to ruin it, and he did. I told him when we see each other again in hell, I will be his eternal torturer, and hung up on him. Jocelyn was there for me. She told me that everything will be okay. Luna and I commented through email. I spoke to her on the 4th, she spent over an hour crying while talking to me. I even spoke to her boyfriend, who asked me permission to marry her. I thought it was funny, but honorable. My wedding is next month and Jocelyn wants me to invite Luna. At the same time, Luna wants me to give her away for her wedding in November. My future father-in-law sat me down and told me that he couldn't grasp my situation, but respect the road I took. Because the road saved his little girl, gave him a handsome grandson, and a future son-in-law that he would kill for. That made me laugh. But he told me that I need to let go of the anger and start forgiving, but never forget. He's right. So we gave Luna an invite to my wedding, even offered to pay for the plane ticket. Her boyfriend, or should I say fiancé, said that he will work it off at my garage when they arrive. I kinda like him. As for me giving her away, I don't know yet. Let's see how the wedding happens first. Thank you again for the advice and the few DMs. No one was rude or disrespectful. You guys helped me so much. I'll update if something happens, but for now, I have to get things ready for my wedding next month. Might be my final update. A lot has happened in such a short window. Again, I would like to thank the large number of support within the DMs. Of course there were hate messages, but all I could say to those people, what you would have done and what I did are two different mindsets, and until you go through the same situation or something similar, don't tell me how I should have felt. Leading up to the wedding I was already on eggshells. Jocelyn was the happiest I have ever seen. My in-laws were freaking due to the number of people that were coming. I swear, I think the whole town came. While all of this was happening, I was an hour and a half away in Boise waiting for Luna and her family at the airport. In the days leading up to her visit, we spoke. A lot. Her mostly crying, apologizing, and me just listening. When she couldn't speak anymore, I was talking to her fiancé, who is more down to earth. When their plane landed, I was so scared. Not for seeing her again, but I was afraid due to my anger. I was afraid that I would lose my temper. The second she saw me at the terminal, she ran to me, crying, and for a split second, I saw my daughter when she was 7. I was weird, picturing a child in my mind. She ran screaming "Daddy," and the second she hugged me, she began to cry loudly. It was like a wail that caused so many people to look at us. She just kept saying sorry over and over, asking me to forgive her, and I just held her for over 15 minutes. She refused to let me go. It took her fiancé and I to convince her to do so. It was as if she felt the second she let go, I was going to vanish. After she composed herself, her fiancé properly introduced himself, and then they introduced me to their child. I won't lie, I cried. I wasn't angry, but I cried holding this infant. Luna was also the splitting image of her mother when she was 19, which made me wonder about Marisol. During the drive home we talked about her fiancé's boot camp, how he's going to be a career man, how Luna was going to college online to learn accounting, mostly catching up conversation. When we arrived at my house, Jocelyn and her family has a spread ready for them. Since we've been together, Jocelyn learned how to cook Spanish foods, but the week leading up to Luna's visit, she went a little overboard. Yet I get it, she wanted to make an impression. Her and Luna just hit it off. Every few minutes Luna would walk towards me just to give me a quick hug and go back to Jocelyn. I was just holding my son and my grandson. While Jocelyn was introducing Luna to her family, I put the babies to bed and I went to the porch for some fresh air. Luna's fiancé was standing by foot of the yard, staring at all of the bisons roaming around. For a moment I wanted to give him the dad talk, but I felt that it wasn't my place. Instead I asked him how he liked the view and he was awestruck. I know the feeling, living in the city the majority of your life, wide open spaces is a marvel to take in. After a minute or two he looked at me and told me how regretful Luna was. I've been with your daughter for 3 years and not a day goes by when she mentioned how much she misses you and regret what she did. Out of everything he told me, that single sentence constantly replays in my mind. Her fiancé's name is Roberto. For a man who is only 19 years old he acts and talks like a man in his 30s. That tells me he had a rough life to mature so quickly. I know the feeling. The following day, I had to go to the shop and Luna practically jumped in the car with the baby. Even Roberto told her it was okay and to enjoy herself. Luna looked like she was going to hyperventilate and I told her that we'll work a half day and I'll spend the rest of the day with her. That seemed to do it and I slowly began to realize how traumatized Luan was. During the drive I asked Roberto how bad was she? She has severe abandonment issues, constantly afraid that he's going to leave her, despite him telling her that he will never. She calls him a lot, a bit clingy at times, and in the beginning, afraid to be herself in fear that they will break up. He had to reaffirm his love for her just so she could let her guard down a little. This was my doing. I know that, but he doesn't blame me. He told me he completely understood why I did what I did. Allow me to say that Roberto is a terrible mechanic. He knows nothing about cars, so I had him clean up to the shop so he could work off the plane tickets. We closed early and when we arrived, Luna practically ran towards me. She looked unhinged. I told her that I'll be back and she went to her fiancé. When I walked into my house, Jocelyn told me that Luna needs to be reminded that everything is going to be fine. That I won't leave her again. I didn't know what to say, but Jocelyn grabbed my hands and told me that Luna is hurting and she needs her father. For the next couple of days I spent all of my time with Luna, getting reacquainted with her. I took her to my in-laws' ranch and showed her the bisons, the elks, and took her on a hike. 2 days before the wedding I apologized to her for leaving. I apologize for the way I acted, apologize for the actions I took. She didn't want to hear none of it. She told me that there's nothing that I should apologize for. She said she knows she was the reason why it all fell apart, that she knows it was her fault and I had to stop her. I began to cry. I told her that it wasn't her fault. I was angry, I was hurting, and despite what happened, I should be the one who should apologize. We both cried and just held each other. Luna appeared to be slightly better. On the day of my wedding she was happy. In the last minute, Jocelyn made her into a bridesmaid and Roberto a groomsman. The wedding was beautiful. During the reception I asked the DJ to play the song from Luna's Quince and I asked her to dance with me. She was crying the entire time, holding on to me for dear life as we danced. I haven't felt this happy in a long time. I let Luna and her fiancé stay in my house, taking care of her little brother while I went to Hawaii for my honeymoon. When we got home, she was happy. She hugged us. It felt great. Roberto told me that he's going to Camp Dwyer in Afghanistan and would like to know if Luna could stay near us. He would pay for an apartment near us, until he could buy a house. Of course I said yes. They went back to the city the day before yesterday. Like I said, it's been eventful. Luna's wedding is in November and Roberto is leaving in December. Roberto sent me what constitutes as a year's rent for a townhouse community 3 miles away from my house. However, Jocelyn suggests we should put a double wide on our property for Luna and let her save her money to buy a house when Roberto comes back. Marisol has been blowing up my phone, and based on the messages she left, she's not happy that Luna is moving. Right now, my focus is my family and to mend my relationship with my daughter. 1 year later. Before I begin, I would to thank all of you. Even the haters and the doubters. When I posted a year ago I was in a dark place. I was always angry. Lost. Depressed. The people here really helped me, and the gratitude that I have for all of you will be with me until the day I die. This community helped me get my daughter back. All of you helped me get my life back. The past year has been great, but not without its ups and downs. I have another son and Jocelyn wants to try for another one. I'm going to have another grandchild. Luna is 2 months pregnant and my son-in-law has applied for officer training school. I'm hoping he gets in. My daughter has been getting a little better since the therapist started her in prolonged exposure. For a while her panic attacks went from mild to severe, and thanks to Werewolf IL84 for suggesting exposure therapy because it has been a blessing. Our therapy sessions together were hard in the beginning. Listening to everything she went through, she owned up to her mistakes and I owned up to mine. My in-laws have her working on the ranch, nothing fancy, feeding horses, putting out hay, and my MIL has been teaching her on herding bison. It makes me smile when I see her on a horse, her face lights up. She and Jocelyn act like mother and daughter, and seeing how Jocelyn is overprotective of her is adorable. I'm blessed to marry such a wonderful woman. When I met her, she had just come out of a very abusive relationship. She had a swollen eye and bruises around her throat, and I volunteered to fix her father's 3 tractors for free since they were damaged due to her ex pouring salt and sugar in the tanks. At first, I mind my business, but as she brought me food we talked and got to know one another, and a month later we had our first kiss. It was great. Took her out to dinner, and a few days later her ex came to see me and tried to scare me off. I put the fear of God into him. Sorry, went off topic there. In the first week of May, my ex-father-in-law passed away and I was afraid that Luna would relapse, but she was strong, thanks to Roberto being there with her. That man had a strong impact on her life, and the level of gratitude that I owe him will never be repaid. We all flew to New York and he had his viewing like a true Burqua. He had a live salsa band, an open bar, and a buffet with patels, pernil, sancocho. All of his favorite foods was there for all to chow down. Do not mourn me, celebrate me. That was the banner over his casket that was draped with the Puerto Rican flag, and he was wearing his vanilla ice cream suit. I couldn't help but smile the entire time. Marisol was there, but she was just staring into nothing. It was like her brain shut off only to turn back on when Luna or I sat next to her and she began talking about preparing for the quince. After a while she realized where she is and her brain shuts off again. Her therapist told us during the second day of the viewing that her mind is stuck in a moment she was at her happiest. When Luna walked away, the therapist told me that in her professional opinion, she believed my cousin may have raped Marisol and her mind protected her from that trauma. Rationalized it and made her believe it was a moment of weakness. That messed me up, and I told Jocelyn what the therapist said and she was shocked. She insisted that I should tell Luna, but I was afraid to. She made so many steps to get better, I didn't want her to revert back. Instead, we told Roberto first, who wanted to go and find my cousin, but I talked him down and then we sat as a family and spoke to Luna. It was a bad night. A really bad night. We had an incident at the burial 2 days later. My cousin showed up uninvited and caused a scene. He was drunk, and I wanted to end him, I believe is the proper term. Instead, I told him to leave. Roberto was holding me back and my cousin began shouting that he was always better than me, and always will be, and it was because of him and his daughter that I made my life better, so in a way he's responsible for me bettering myself. I got angry, and I practically lifted Roberto off the ground to get him, but Luna punched him in the mouth and began pummeling him. She was screaming and crying, she was so angry while attacking him. I briefly hesitated, and Roberto pulled her off of him. As he was getting up, Jocelyn punched him and knocked him out, breaking her index finger in the process. Before we went back home, we had a family meeting and we all agreed that we will transfer Marisol into a mental facility near us since she has no one else. We are still going to therapy, and with this new realization, my daughter is trying to cope with the fact that she might be a product of rape. Before this happened, I was planning to adopt her since legally she's no longer my daughter. I want to make it official again, but I feel like the timing might not be right. I will answer any questions. I owe this community a lot and God bless you all. Update Post 2, How Things Are Going, April 13, 2023. Hello everyone. It's been a while and I would like to express my gratitude to all of you. My family continues to grow. I have 2 grandchildren, a boy and a girl. 2 sons and another daughter on the way. For a while I was guilt-stricken, being a bit depressed after being told what happened in Marisol's hypnotherapy session. From the explanation, she said no twice before freezing up for over a minute and she begged him to stop, which was when my cousin finished and got off of her. The therapist said she rolled to her side and kept repeating over and over it was a mistake, and she convinced herself that it was a mistake. That truly impacted me. It caused this cloud of depression to hover over me. I blamed myself, I blamed my cousin, I began playing scenarios in my head, focusing on the could've, would've, should've, and it hit so hard. I told myself that my cousin was right, I did ruin her. I struggled to remember every family interaction to see if there were any signs. Anything that would have indicated that he did something to her, and there was. Whenever he was in the house, she was never in the same room with him or alone with him. I never noticed it, but now, everything is so vivid. Hindsight is a real bitch. Over the next few months, Luna and I sat in a family therapy session with Marisol. Like many of you, the therapist also asked me what I would have done if Marisol told me the truth when I got out. Honestly, I would have taken him out. If she would have told me years later, I would have beaten him by an inch of his life. Finally, I was asked if she would have told me during the quince. I said I wouldn't believe her at first. However, I would have asked, poked, prodded, and eventually found out the truth. The way I was feeling back then, I would have sent my cousin to the hospital, but I wouldn't have skipped town. I believe that things would have been dramatically different. Eventually, Marisol became consolable. She cried and apologized to both of us. As time went on, Marisol confessed that since she couldn't give me another child, she focused on being the best wife and partner she could be, and when I left, she admitted that when she looked at our daughter, all she saw was my cousin. I asked her why she allowed my cousin to still come to our home. She said that in a way he was my brother. I was always so proud of him, especially when he became a pastor. I spoke very highly of him, I always went to him for advice, and in her mind, she saw him as a mistake. A brief moment of mistake that wouldn't go away. So she avoided him at every turn. Luna's panic attacks came back, a bit more aggressive, but now she's doing well. I officially adopted her last month. It was my birthday gift to her. She couldn't stop crying, she looked so happy. From what I heard, my cousin moved to Puerto Rico after getting fired. The bank had to let him go due to the vast number of people walking into the bank and making a scene. We placed a new trailer next to Luna for Marisol. She was released in mid-March, and at first, it was awkward, extremely awkward. I used to watch TV shows with scenarios like this. Having your ex-wife and current wife near one another. On TV they're friendly. That's TV. Jocelyn was very civil but made a clear boundary for Marisol to follow. However, Marisol told us that she doesn't want to stay on our property. She wants to stay near us, but all she wants is to be a mother and grandmother. She wants her and me to be friends, but distant friends, and I could respect that. A few times Jocelyn and Marisol butted heads. Mostly on child-rearing and cooking habits. My in-laws, like me, felt awkward about the entire situation, and it's not helping that my brother-in-law is a bit smitten with Marisol to the point that Jocelyn smacked him in the back of his head so she could knock some sense into him. It didn't work. The man is 2 years older than me, a widower of 2 years with 3 little girls. He's a really nice guy, a great wrangler, and he's been around my property more than I could care for just so he could try to talk to Marisol. I don't mind, but Jocelyn does. She's very overprotective of her big brother and she feels that if the two of them do get together, she would not know if it was genuine. I could respect that. There was an incident on Luna's birthday, shortly after giving her the adoption papers. I danced with Luna, and then with Jocelyn, and when Marisol tried to dance with me after dancing with Roberto and Jocelyn's brother, I respectfully declined, but it enacted Jocelyn's green-eyed monster and she became a bit territorial. On Easter, we were watching the kids hunting eggs and I overheard Marisol tell Jocelyn that she envied her. She was able to give me children. Jocelyn told her that Luna is my daughter, despite the circumstances, Luna was mine and she should always remember that. Marisol cried and it was the first time I saw them getting along. This is where I'm at right now. Hopefully, everything balances out. 4 months later. Healing takes time and patience. Healing takes understanding. It also helps when there's a support system. My wife is my support system. Watching her with my daughter, the way she's there for her, and lately the way she's there for my ex-wife. Taking her to the Survivor group meeting every week amazes me with how blessed I am. I sat her down and thanked her for everything she has done. I told her how lucky I am to be with her and she gave me a wide smile before kissing me. She tells me that I saved her as well, reminding me about her very abusive ex and how trapped she was, then telling me her being there for me and my family was the least she could do. We sat watching TV while holding each other and that was when I got a IM from my cousin. I quickly blocked him. A week later, I get a letter from him and I burned it. Another week went by and my wife tells me that her brother is heavily interested in asking her out. I personally do not care, but I told her that Marisol is a grown adult who is healing from a lot of trauma, and if he understands that and is willing to be patient, then I have no issues. A day later I get another letter from my cousin and once again I burned it. Normally I would complain about how he found me, but I am named after my great-grandfather whose name is extremely unique and my last name is not that common, so finding me with a simple Google search wasn't that difficult. In mid-June, we were enjoying a bonfire. I smiled at my daughter and son-in-law slow dancing to no music. My wife had her head resting on my chest and I noticed my brother-in-law and Marisol kissing and I smiled. A few days later my cousin tried to reach out to Luna on Facebook and she had a panic attack. Roberto blocked him and later on that day while we were at the supermarket, my wife's ex came back to town and had the nerve to try to talk to her. I could see the fear in her eyes and I just reacted. It was a single punch, but I made sure it spoke volume. My wife, my rock, my support was a quaking mess. The way she was shaking and terrified made me want to pounce on him, but the sheriff intervened and told him to leave before checking on Jocelyn. In the years we've been together, I've never seen her so terrified. While the sheriff was talking to us, I watched her ex walking past the window and the bastard was smiling at me. The sheriff noticed and grabbed my arm, telling me to take Jocelyn home. During that drive she was quiet and when we got home, all she wanted was for me to hold her and don't let go. Luna was extremely concerned and Jocelyn grabbed her as well and pulled her into the hug. None of us had ever seen her like this and all I wanted to do was protect her. Later that day, her brother showed up and told us that he and the sheriff paid her ex a visit and told him to leave. That didn't work. That man showed up at my shop the next day, threatening to sue me for assault. I just smiled at him. I told him in the 10 minutes he was running his mouth, I came up with a half-dozen ways to make him disappear. That shut him up. But for the next week and a half, he kept testing me. Testing us. That entire time Jocelyn was constantly afraid, thinking he might do something to her. To me. Her brother is a game warden and warned him to stay away and the SOB reported him to his supervisor. Every time I wanted to approach him Jocelyn begged me not to. However, she's my wife and I needed to protect her, but I told her that I will not approach him. Her father soon told me everything about that man. Everything he did to her. I told him that I was surprised that he never got rid of him and he said around the time he was seriously contemplating it, his kneecaps got broken and he left town. He was smiling wide at me and I couldn't help but smile back. On the 29th we were preparing for the upcoming Western Idaho Fair when I got another letter from my cousin. This time I left it on my desk. Marisol approached me, asking me if it was okay for her to pursue a relationship with Jocelyn's brother and I told her it was, but only if she feels that she was ready. She shrugged, telling me that she doesn't know what she wanted, but she does like him and thought about him and his kids a lot. I told her I want her to find happiness and she began to cry, but they were happy tears and I was happy for her. My phone rang. It was the sheriff. Jocelyn's ex and another man is in the hospital, his face is practically smashed in, and the other man had 2 broken eye sockets. I was preparing for him to accuse me, but then he told me that he had my son-in-law in holding. The sheriff said there were a lot of witnesses that came in my son-in-law's defense. I didn't want to hear it over the phone and I raced to his office. When I got there, I saw Luna sitting by the front desk with a nasty bruise on her left cheek. The sheriff came to me and told me that according to all the witnesses, Jocelyn's ex purposely bumped into Roberto as he and Luna left the coffee shop. An argument started and Roberto tried to de-escalate the situation. Another man appeared and shoved Roberto, and Luna shoved the man and Jocelyn's ex back, prompting Jocelyn's ex to smack Luna and Roberto, placing the two men in the hospital. The sheriff is not pressing charges, but he had to inform Roberto's commander. After being released, Roberto had to leave for his 13-hour drive to Yuma immediately. Luna was blaming herself for pushing Jocelyn's ex. Jocelyn is trying to be there for her but is blaming herself for this entire situation. Marisol is surprisingly there for both of them, and the topping of this shit sandwich came in the other day. A woman who is 6 months pregnant came to my shop. She asked for my name, and when I saw her, she told me that she was my cousin's fiancée, which took me by complete surprise. My cousin has leukemia and has been trying to reach out to me, Luna, and Marisol to make penance. I told her to leave, but she refused. She wanted me and Luna to get tested to see if we're a match to donate bone marrow. She burst into tears, telling me that she doesn't want to have a child grow up without a father. I told her that she will be doing her child a favor. She slapped me. She said that my cousin was completely honest with her. She knows everything that he has done, but she wants him to be in their child's life, and again begged me to get tested. I could pretty much guarantee I'll be a fucking match because that's my fucking luck. When I went back to my office, I opened up my cousin's letter. I was expecting to read a plea for mercy, for me to save his life. Instead, it was a letter confessing everything he has done. How while growing up, he looked up to me. Loved me, but when I began rebelling and joined the Latin Kings, he hated me for the pain I placed our grandmother in. I took everything for granted, and even though I always had his back and scolded him to make sure he stayed in school, he saw me as a hypocrite because I never took my own advice. Me taking Marisol away was the straw that broke the camel's back. He didn't expect me to actually try to make my life better. When I got stabbed and arrested, he saw that as divine intervention and admitted, despite her telling him no, he had to have her. He placed in the letter that because of him the woman he loved was broken. He ruined his daughter and destroyed the only man who loved him unconditionally. He also placed in the letter that if his fiancée ever comes to see me, telling me that he was sick. It's true. He is sick, but he doesn't want me or Luna to get tested. This is the path he chose, and the outcome will be his. He ended the letter profusely apologizing to all of us. I saw my pastor soon after, venting everything, and he compared me to Job. This is ironic because out of all the biblical tales, I hated the book of Job. My pastor told me that everyone struggles like Job, some more than others, but it teaches us to comfort those who suffer and how we become better people through adversity. This morning I went to the hospital. The benefit of a small town is that everyone knows everyone's business. Without asking, the nurse escorted me to Jocelyn's ex's room, where I sat there waiting for him to wake up. He was shocked to see me. I had a conversation with him, and even though his jaw was wired shut, he completely understood the man I will become if he ever crossed my family again. I forgot how easily it was to become someone so dark. And as of this moment, I am sitting in the cancer ward, just typing this long tirade on my phone, thinking about getting myself tested to see if I am a match. Wondering, why must we always be tested? Why must we constantly endure? Why must there be people who want to ruin everything? 4 months later. Hello everyone. I would like to thank you. Even some of the haters and naysayers. Especially the ones I met at the Idaho State Fair who were shocked we were real people. Right now I'm sitting on the balcony by my hotel room. Spoke to my wife and kids a few hours ago. I missed them. 2 hours ago I buried my cousin, and I was the only person at his funeral, and I was the only person who attended his wake. I tried to donate my marrow to him. When I told everyone what I was going to do, Luna was shocked. Jocelyn was proud of me for taking the high road, and Marisol understood. She told me despite all of the cruel things I have done in my youth, I was never a killer. I went through a series of blood work to make sure I could do it, and even flew to Puerto Rico back in November to personally tell him, and he looked so frail in that bed. He struggled to smile when he saw me. Thought I was there to forgive him, and I told him I wasn't there for that, but I was there to help him. I told him I was a match and was there to donate. He laughed at me and shook his head. He refused. I told him that he needed to stop being a coward and be a father to that child his fiancée was having, and he told me that he was too far gone and that donation would not work. He's going to die, and he was okay with it. I spoke to his doctors and they confirmed. My cousin then told me that his fiancée emptied his savings, cleaned out his house, and disappeared. He said that it was what he deserved, and I didn't disagree with him. We soon sat there awkwardly for a few hours in silence, watching TV. I didn't know why I went back the following day just to do the same and repeated it for the rest of the week. No words, just the two of us watching TV. When I got back, I told Luna what happened and she hugged me tightly, asking me if I was all right, and I nodded. Thanksgiving came and went. I went back in December for a week doing the same thing, sitting in silence while watching TV. On Christmas, Roberto paid me what he owed on the trailer. I was shocked. He and Luna then told me that they were going to move to Yuma. I knew I was supposed to be happy for them, but I cried. I didn't want her to move away. I just got her back and I know it was selfish on my behalf, but I wanted her just a little bit longer and she cried as well, promising me that she would visit as much as she could and I didn't want to let her go, but I understood in the end. On New Year's Eve, my brother-in-law proposed to Marisol and she said yes. I thought they were moving too fast, but Marisol said she put her life on hold long enough and needed to be happy, and then she asked me if I could give her away. I agreed and we all got shit-faced. A week and a half ago, I went back to Puerto Rico, visited my cousin, and sat down to watch TV. He looked at me and apologized for being a shit person. I looked at him and told him that he was lucky he was dying, otherwise I would pop him in the mouth. That made him laugh and he said he wouldn't doubt it, and that comment made me laugh. He died the following day. We were watching TV and he told me that he was going to take a nap and never woke up. No one else showed up at his wake, and as he was buried, I was the only one there, and as angry as I was at that little fucker, I couldn't stop crying as they lowered his casket into the ground. All I could think about was all the times I protected him. The time I taught him how to tie his shoes. Helping him with his cursive. Teaching him how to play handball. Teaching him how to drive, taking him to his first R-rated movie. Every moment of happiness I had with this man flooded, and none of the fuck shit he did to me. Just all of these good memories came in and I couldn't understand why. I just stood there, silently crying as they poured dirt over him. I'm in this hotel and the burden I had in my chest for so long feels like it's gone and I'm so confused. Therapy didn't help it. Anger management. Meeting Jocelyn. Getting my daughter back. Every positive aspect that happened didn't remove that burden in my chest, but spending time with that man in his final moments took away that burden. Took away that anger, and I do not know why or how.